We know from the scheme of our H2 Math exams, we are going to be dealing with questions that will require us to be applying math in the real-world contexts. So what is this real-world context? Let's continue with this question from RI 2017. And I believe that they have expertly set one such question in part 2. So in part 2, we are supposed to be finding an inequality between alpha. Alpha is belonging to the equation of the plane that represents the screen, and h is belonging to the z coordinate of v, such that the shadow of the pyramid cast onto the screen will not exceed the height of the screen. And in order for us to do such a question consistently, what we need to do is first, we need to pause. We need to pause maybe like 1 or 2 seconds to look at the scenario. And we are going to activate the first skill. There are actually 2 skills that we will need in order for us to solve a real-world context-based kind of question. So the first skill is, the criteria for the first skill is actually not math at all. It is the fact that we have lived our life. Because this is a real-world context kind of scenario. So the very first thing that we need to do is to draw the inspiration from our life experiences, from the way that we have interacted with the real world, from the conversation that we have with people, from the facts that we have read in articles, from the opinions that we have heard from our teachers. We are going to consolidate all these life experiences that is almost independent of H2 Math. We're going to consolidate this and then ask ourselves, how can I relate these life experiences to the scenario that is given to us? For example, I can imagine that if there were to be a point source of light there, and if the light is pointing towards me, and my shadow is going to be cast onto the wall. So if I'm positioned here, I cannot move anywhere else, and that point source light also cannot be moved anywhere else. In order for me to control how my shadow is going to be cast onto the wall, I'm going to just move around, right? And if I want to make sure that, hey, my shadow is going to be within the height of the wall, what I can do is, if it is already outside the height of the wall, okay, so what I can do is maybe I'll squat down a little bit further so that I can bring the shadow lower, right? So the height of my shadow is determined by, is it my shoulder? Is it my stomach? No, it is my head. It is in fact the top of my head, because light travels in a straight line, right? So if you were to look at the scenario that is given here, the shadow that is going to be cast by the pyramid onto the screen from this point source is going to be from here, going to the pyramid, cast onto the screen, and the highest possible point that is from the shadow is going to cause by this highest point here, V. So if I were to draw a line from P to V and extending it all the way to the screen, this point here is going to represent for us the highest possible point that the shadow of the pyramid that is cast onto the screen will lie. This is the highest possible point, which means that the shadow is going to be from here all the way until here. Which means that in order for me, I'm trying to now relate it to my life experiences. So in order for me to make sure that the height of the shadow is going to be within the screen, we are going to vary, what we can do is to vary the height of the pyramid. And since h here is let's say a variable, so that is actually possible. So now how can H2 Math, okay, that's when H2 Math comes in. Okay, once we have gotten this relationship between the scenario that is described to us in words to our actual life experiences about the real world, then H2 Math is going to come in as a companion, as a help. Because H2 Math, once we have gotten this, okay, so you don't learn this through your H2 Math lecture notes, through Achevas TV, through our amazing YouTube channel. You don't learn this through those. You learn this through, you perceive this through your life experience. And once this is done, H2 Math comes in to help you to calculate, if that is actually necessary, to help you to calculate and transform these life experiences into numbers, into equations, into formulas, into inequalities, which means that what I want to do now is to know exactly where this is. And since this is a vectors question, H2 Math tells me that the place where this is going to be in the coordinates form. And I'm going to call this point here, let's say, N, which means that I'm going to try to solve for the coordinates of this point N. And in order for me to do that, H2 Math comes in again. In order for me to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make use of the result that is in part 1. Part 1, we have found the equation of the line that passes through P PV, and this line is going to be extended all the way until it hits the screen, which is defined by another H2 math concept. It is the equation of the plane. So what we need to do in order for us to find the coordinates of this point N is to find the intersection between this line that passes through PV and the plane r dot 100 is equal to alpha. So let's trigger this H2 math part to solve for the intersection between lines and planes. To solve for the intersection between lines and planes, this I'm going to call it equation number 1, which I've already done here, and this I'm going to call it equation number 2. So what I'm going to do is to substitute equation number 2 into equation number 1, since they are going to be sharing the same r, in order for me to solve for the intersection between these two geometry. So substituting equation number 1 into equation number 2, this on the right hand side is 20 minus 10 lambda, then minus 4 plus 2 lambda, and we have a lambda h. So this is r dot 100. So we have 100. This is equal to alpha. So expanding this dot product, we have a 20 minus 10 lambda times 1. Then the other two are 0. This is equal to alpha. What are we trying to solve here? We are trying to solve for lambda, so that with this value of lambda, we can then find the position vector of n. So let's find out what is lambda. Lambda here is going to be equal to 20 minus alpha divided by 10, which means that the coordinates or the position vector of n, ON, is going to be equal to 20 minus 40 plus lambda 20 minus alpha over 10. Please take note that this is just a number. This is not a vector, okay? Multiply by, so a number multiplied by minus 10 to h. And if you draw experiences from your life experience again, okay? So what are we actually interested in? Is it the full coordinates of n? Yeah, that will give us the position of n, right? But we are even more interested in just the height of the shadow. So the height of the shadow is embedded within n, and it is manifesting as the z coordinate of n. The z coordinate of n. So I'm going to just extract out the z coordinate of n to continue with the discussion. And the z coordinate is going to be the last row. So it's going to be 0 plus this multiplied by h. That is 20 minus alpha over 10. This multiplied by h. So what do we want this h, this z coordinate to do? We want to make sure that the height is going to be within the height of the screen. And the height of the screen has been given to us as 35 units. So which means that this has to be less than or equal to 35. But let's be practical, okay? We are drawing experiences from our life. So this shadow cannot possibly be just less than or equal to 35 all the time, right? It has to have a minimum height. So the minimum height is, I guess, 0. That is when there's no pyramid at all. So I'm going to make sure that this is bigger or equal to 0. And guess what? This is my answer. This is the inequality that the question wants, that is going to involve alpha and h. And maybe if you want to, it is not necessary, but if you want to, maybe you can multiply by 10 throughout. So this is going to be 0. Here we have a 20 minus alpha multiplied by h. This is less than 350. My answer, I'm going to get full marks for this. And the skills that is needed, the skills that we have discussed that is needed will be in two folds. Number 1 is we need our life experiences. And these life experiences is not read through H2 Math, which means that you don't have to just keep reading your lecture notes. You don't have to just keep looking at the videos that we have produced at Achevas, although you should be looking at them because I think we have produced very, very good videos. But what you need to do is to think about your life experiences. Try to get the relationship between the problem that you're looking at and the experiences that you have with or without H2 Math first. Get an idea so that you can imagine the problem. Then look at H2 Math. That is the second thing that you should do. Take a look at H2 Math and ask yourself, what is it that I've learned in H2 Math that will help me to calculate this problem that I can perceive in my head such that it can become numbers, it can become formulas, it can become things that can be replicated again, because numbers, once you have gotten numbers and formulas, they can be repeatedly done again and again and again and solve many other problems. So once you are able to do this, I believe it is then possible for us to consistently solve this kind of real-world context question. We're going to be expecting at least 2 of these in our